Jack Murphy's hands were stained black with grease and desperation. He stood in the cramped back office of Murphy's Auto Repair, counting crumpled $20 bills for the third time, hoping the number would somehow change. It didn't. The calculator on his father's old wooden desk still glowed with the same soul-crushing figure, negative $5,247.82. Around him, the shop whispered stories of better days. Chrome tools his dad had bought brand new now wore coats of rust like forgotten monuments. The waiting room chairs sat empty, their torn vinyl seats collecting dust instead of customers. Peeling paint hung from the walls like dead skin, and the Coca-Cola clock that used to tick with promise had stopped at 3:17. Maybe a month ago, maybe longer. Jack had stopped noticing. He pressed his calloused palms against his eyes, trying to push back the headache that had been his constant companion for weeks. 7 days. That's all he had left before the landlord's eviction notice became reality. 7 days before 3 generations of Murphys ended with him. That's when he heard it. The unmistakable sound of a dying engine, sputtering, coughing, begging for mercy. Jack looked up through the grimy office window to see an old Honda Civic limping into his lot, trailing a plume of white smoke like a distress signal. The car shuddered to a stop, and out stepped an elderly woman in a faded brown coat, her hands trembling as she clutched a worn leather purse. Their eyes met through the glass. Jack's stomach twisted. He knew that look. He'd seen it on his own mother's face years ago, fear mixed with hope, desperation searching for kindness. He had 2 choices: turn her away and maybe scrape together enough for 1 more week, or help her and seal his fate. If you've ever had to choose between doing what's right and doing what's profitable, hit that subscribe button. This story will remind you why character still matters. Jack wiped his hands on an already dirty rag and walked out to meet her. Up close, the woman looked to be in her mid-70s, with silver hair pulled back in a simple bun and eyes that carried the weight of worry. Her faded brown coat had seen better decades, and she held her worn leather purse against her chest like it contained everything she owned. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she said, her voice soft and apologetic. "My car just started smoking and I don't know what to do. I need to get to my granddaughter's birthday party across town. She's turning 7 today and I promised her I'd be there." Her voice cracked slightly. "This car is all I have." Jack felt something twist in his chest. The way she apologized for needing help, the tremor in her voice, the desperate hope in her eyes, it all reminded him of someone. His mother. Catherine Murphy had raised Jack alone after his father died, working 3 jobs to keep the shop running and food on the table. She cleaned offices at night, waited tables on weekends, and somehow still found time to teach her son the most important lesson he'd ever learned. He could still hear her voice, exhausted but firm. "Jack, money comes and goes, but how you treat people when they're vulnerable, that stays forever. People before profit, baby, always." She'd been gone 5 years now, but her words lived in his bones. "Let me take a look," Jack said, pushing aside the calculator's cruel numbers. "Pop the hood for me." The diagnosis didn't take long. White smoke billowing from the exhaust, overheating engine, coolant puddle underneath, classic water pump failure. The pump circulates coolant through the engine to prevent overheating. When it fails, the engine can't regulate its temperature, and if you keep driving, you risk warping the cylinder head or even cracking the engine block. In simple terms, her engine was about to cook itself to death. "How bad is it?" the woman asked, wringing her hands. Jack straightened up, already doing the mental math he knew he shouldn't be doing. "Your water pump's shot. The bearing's seized up, so it's not circulating coolant anymore. That's why you're overheating and seeing all that smoke." "How much?" she whispered, and Jack heard his mother's voice in that whisper. He thought about the water pump in his storage room, the last good one he had, the one he'd been saving for a customer's job next week that would have paid $450. He thought about the 6 hours of labor this repair would take. He thought about the negative number on his calculator. Then he looked at her trembling hands. "Let me see what I can do," he said. "Why don't you have a seat inside? This might take a while." 6 hours later, Jack's back screamed in protest as he lowered himself out from under the Honda. His knuckles were bloody from scraping against the engine block in tight spaces. He'd replaced the water pump, flushed the cooling system, replaced the thermostat for good measure, and checked every hose and connection. The last of his spare parts gone, but the engine purred like it was young again. The woman stood when he walked into the waiting room, hope and anxiety written across her face. "You're all set," Jack said, managing a tired smile. "No charge." Her eyes filled with tears. I don't have much, but—" She fumbled with her purse, pulling out a delicate silver locket on a thin chain. "This was my mother's. It's all I have of value. Please take it." Jack gently closed her fingers around the locket. "Keep it. Just promise me you'll drive safe, ma'am, and give your granddaughter a hug from a stranger who hopes she has a wonderful birthday." The woman hugged him, whispered "God bless you," and drove away in her resurrected Honda. Jack stood in his empty lot as the taillights disappeared, the weight of what he'd just done settling over him like a heavy blanket. 7 days until eviction, 0 spare parts, $0 in the bank. Had he just saved someone's day or sealed his own doom? Day 1, Jack posted his hydraulic lift for sale on every marketplace he could find. No responses. He called 12 former customers, trying to keep the desperation out of his voice as he asked if they had any work coming up. 3 didn't answer. 9 said they'd keep him in mind. He knew what that meant. Day 2, the bank loan officer didn't even let him finish his application before sliding it back across the desk. "I'm sorry, Mr. Murphy. Your debt-to-income ratio doesn't meet our minimum requirements." Jack sat in his truck in the bank parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at nothing. Day 3, he tried to make coffee in the shop's ancient pot, but the heating element had finally given up. Like everything else in his life, it seemed. He drank it cold. Lunch was another packet of ramen noodles, his third in as many days. The sodium made his head pound, but ramen was 19 cents a pack. Day 4, Marcus and Tony, his 2 part-time employees, asked if they'd have work next week. Jack couldn't look them in the eyes when he said he'd let them know. Marcus had a baby on the way. Tony was putting himself through community college. Jack went home that night and couldn't sleep, so he didn't. He slept in his office instead, saving the gas money from the commute. Every dollar might matter now. Day 5, he started packing his father's old toolbox, the red Craftsman chest that had taught him everything he knew. Each wrench, each socket, each screwdriver held a memory. His dad teaching him to change oil when he was 8. His mom bringing them lunch during summer breaks. Building something together, something that mattered. Now he was dismantling it, piece by piece. Day 6, Jack sat at his father's desk as the sun went down, a yellow legal pad in front of him. He wrote 2 letters by hand because it felt more honest than typing. The first was to his landlord, Mr. Peterson, asking for just 1 more month, explaining that he was good for it, that he just needed time, knowing it wouldn't matter. The second was harder. "Marcus and Tony," he wrote, his handwriting shaky. "I'm sorry. You deserved better than this. You deserved a boss who could keep his promises." He couldn't finish it. He folded it away and put his head in his hands. Tomorrow, the eviction notice would be enforced. Tomorrow, Murphy's Auto Repair would become another closed storefront with soap-streaked windows. Tomorrow, 3 generations of hard work and honest service would end because Jack Murphy had chosen kindness over survival. He thought about the elderly woman in the brown coat, hoped she'd made it to that birthday party, hoped her granddaughter had smiled. At least someone's day had turned out right. Drop a comment if you've ever felt like you were one bad week away from losing everything you'd built. You're not alone, and this story is about to take a turn you won't see coming. Jack woke up on the office couch at dawn, his neck stiff and his back aching. Eviction day. He'd barely slept, running through scenarios in his mind, each one ending the same way, with him turning the lights off for the last time and locking the door behind him. He made himself stand up, splash cold water on his face from the bathroom sink, and face whatever came next with whatever dignity he had left. Through the office window, the morning sun cast long shadows across the empty lot. At least it was a clear day. Small Mercedes. That's when he saw them. 3 black SUVs rolled into his gravel lot like a funeral procession, their glossy paint jobs and chrome accents so out of place they might as well have been spaceships. These weren't the beat-up sedans and rusty pickups that usually limped into Murphy's auto repair. These were the kind of vehicles that cost more than Jack's entire annual revenue. His stomach dropped. Repo men. Had he missed a payment on something? Or worse, was this a lawsuit? Had something he'd fixed failed catastrophically? His mind raced through every repair he'd done in the past 6 months, searching for something that could bring this kind of trouble to his doorstep. The door of the middle SUV opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, maybe 50, with close-cropped gray hair and dark skin. His charcoal suit fit him like it had been made specifically for his frame, and it probably had. The fabric caught the morning light with a subtle sheen that screamed money. He carried a leather briefcase that looked older than Jack but maintained with obvious care. But it was his eyes that caught Jack's attention as the man approached. They were kind, crinkled at the corners like someone who smiled often. That small detail confused Jack more than anything else. People coming to ruin your life don't usually have kind eyes. Jack stepped outside, wiping his sweaty palms on his jeans. "Can I help you?" The man extended his hand. His grip was firm but not aggressive. "Mr. Murphy, I'm Marcus Webb, attorney for the Ashford estate." Jack shook his hand, his mind blank. "The Ashford estate? I'm sorry, I don't know what that is." Marcus's expression shifted into something that looked almost like admiration. "The woman whose car you repaired last week, the Honda with the failed water pump, that was Mrs. Helena Ashford." Jack blinked. He remembered her, the trembling hands, the brown coat, the birthday party she'd been desperate to reach. "Okay, is something wrong with the repair? Is she all right?" Marcus smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "She's perfectly fine. The car runs beautifully thanks to you." He paused, letting the moment stretch. "Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Helena Ashford is the widow of Thomas Ashford, one of the most successful philanthropists in this city's history, and for the past 5 years she's been conducting a very specific test." Jack's confusion must have shown on his face, because Marcus continued. "Mrs. Ashford poses as someone in desperate need at various service businesses throughout the city, mechanics, plumbers, electricians. She wants to see who still has integrity when they think no one important is watching." Marcus's kind eyes locked onto Jack's. "In 5 years and 47 tests, you're the first person who didn't try to exploit her. The first person who treated her like she was your own family." Jack's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. "I don't understand. Why are you here?" Marcus set his briefcase down and opened it. "Because Mrs. Ashford wants to change your life." Marcus pulled out a leather folder and gestured toward the office. "May we sit down? This will take a few minutes to explain." Jack led him inside, his legs feeling disconnected from his body. They sat across from each other at his father's old desk, the same desk where Jack had written those goodbye letters just hours ago. "Thomas Ashford," Marcus began, "built his fortune from absolutely nothing. He started as a day laborer, worked his way up to owning a construction company, and eventually became one of the wealthiest men in the state. But he never forgot where he came from. He never forgot the people who helped him along the way, the ones who gave him a chance when he had nothing to offer in return." Jack listened, his hands folded on the desk to keep them from shaking. "When Thomas died 8 years ago, he left his wife Helena with a mission: find people who still operate with what they called gold hearts. People who choose integrity over profit, especially when it costs them everything. Marcus leaned forward. In a world that rewards greed and punishes kindness, they wanted to prove that good people still exist, and more than that, they wanted to reward them. So the test, Jack said slowly, the pieces falling into place. The test, Marcus confirmed. Every year, Mrs. Ashford poses as someone desperate and vulnerable at different service businesses. Mechanics, electricians, plumbers, people who work with their hands, and could easily take advantage of someone who doesn't know better. And, Jack asked, though part of him didn't want to know. Marcus's expression darkened. Year 1, an electrician quoted her $3,000 for a job that should have cost $200. Year 2, a plumber refused to help her at all because she looked poor. Year 3, an appliance repairman tried to sell her a new refrigerator she didn't need for $4,500. Year 4, he paused, his jaw tightening. A mechanic tried to steal her purse while she was in the bathroom. Jack felt sick. Last year, another mechanic charged her $1,800 for an oil change and told her she needed a new transmission. She didn't. Marcus opened the folder. Then last week, she came to you. I didn't know, Jack said quickly. She reminded me of my mom and I. We know, Marcus interrupted gently. Mrs. Ashford sat in her car across the street and watched you through your window. She watched you pull out that water pump, your last one. She watched you skip lunch because you were so focused on getting her car running. She watched you refuse payment, refuse her mother's locket, and send her on her way with nothing but a smile and concern for her safety. Jack couldn't speak. His throat had closed up completely. Marcus slid a document across the desk. This is a deed transfer for a commercial estate in the downtown district. 10 buildings, fully occupied, currently valued at approximately $100 million. As of this morning, you own it. The words didn't make sense. Jack stared at the document, at his name typed in official legal text, at numbers that looked like they belonged in a different universe. This can't, Jack's voice cracked. This can't be real. It's real, Marcus said softly, but there's more. He pulled out another document. You're also being appointed as the trustee of the Ashford Foundation for Struggling Tradespeople. It's a $50 million endowment dedicated to helping electricians, plumbers, carpenters, and mechanics who are facing the exact situation you were in last week. Good people doing honest work who hit hard times through no fault of their own. Tears were streaming down Jack's face now, and he didn't bother wiping them away. Why? Why me? Marcus smiled that kind smile again. Because Mrs. Ashford believes that the person who knows what it's like to be drowning is the best person to throw the life preserver. Because you proved that even when you had nothing, you still gave everything. Because you're exactly the kind of person Thomas always hoped still existed. Jack put his head in his hands and wept, not just from relief, though that was part of it. He wept for his mother who taught him this. He wept for his father, whose tools had become instruments of kindness. He wept for every impossible moment of the past week that had somehow, impossibly, led to this. I don't deserve this, he whispered. That, Marcus said, standing and extending his hand one more time, is exactly why you do. Smash that like button if you believe good people still exist, and sometimes, just sometimes, they get the recognition they deserve. Over the next 3 weeks, Jack learned what the Ashford Foundation truly meant, and what his role in it would become. The foundation existed to support skilled tradespeople facing genuine hardship, electricians who'd been hospitalized and couldn't work, plumbers whose trucks had been stolen, wiping out their mobile businesses overnight, carpenters caring for sick family members while trying to keep their shops afloat, mechanics like Jack, who'd done everything right but found themselves one bad month away from losing everything their families had built. But Jack wasn't just a recipient of the Ashfords' generosity. He was now the gatekeeper. As trustee, he would review applications, investigate circumstances, and decide who received help and how much. The irony wasn't lost on him. The man who'd been $5,247 behind on rent 7 days ago now controlled resources that could change thousands of lives. "How do I know who really needs it?" Jack asked Helena during their first meeting at her estate, a sprawling property that somehow felt warm despite its size. She sat across from him in a sunroom filled with plants, wearing a cardigan that looked just as worn as the brown coat she'd worn to his shop. She reached across and took his grease-stained hand in her soft one. "Remember how you felt last week? Remember what it was like to count those crumpled bills for the third time, hoping the number would change? Remember what it felt like to choose between helping someone and saving yourself?" Her eyes held his. "Never forget that feeling, Jack. That's your compass. That's how you'll know who to help." Jack's first decision as trustee was to keep Murphy's auto repair exactly where it was, but transform it into something more. It would still fix cars, but now it would also serve as a training center for young people who wanted to learn a trade but couldn't afford technical school. The tools his father bought, the bay where his mother used to bring lunch, the desk where he'd almost written his surrender, all of it would live on with purpose. Marcus and Tony, his two part-time employees who'd been facing unemployment, became the directors of the training program. Marcus would handle outreach and student recruitment. Tony would teach alongside Jack, turning his community college education into real-world opportunity for others. "You sure about this?" Marcus asked him, his voice thick with emotion as Jack handed him the director contract. "You're really keeping us on." "You stuck with me when I had nothing to offer," Jack said. "Now I've got something to give back. Besides, I'm going to need people I trust. This foundation thing, it's bigger than just me." Because it was bigger, much bigger. The statistics Marcus Webb had shared painted a sobering picture. Nearly 40% of small trade businesses fail within the first 5 years, often not due to lack of skill, but because of unexpected expenses, medical emergencies, or equipment failures. These were the people who kept society running, who fixed the electricity when it went out, repaired the plumbing when pipes burst, kept vehicles safe on the roads. Essential workers who somehow remained invisible until they disappeared entirely. The Ashford Foundation would change that, one tradesperson at a time. Within 2 months, Jack had approved grants for 17 struggling tradespeople across the city. An electrician whose van had been totaled could now replace it. A plumber facing eviction could catch up on rent and keep his family housed. A carpenter whose hands had been injured in an accident could afford the surgery that would let him work again. And each person who received help was asked to do just one thing in return. When they were back on their feet and saw someone else struggling, remember how it felt. And help if they could. The ripple effect had begun. Jack's story started appearing in local news, not because he sought attention, but because people needed to know that kindness still mattered, that integrity still counted, that choosing to do the right thing, even when it cost everything, could still mean something in a world that often seemed to reward only greed. But here's the thing about Jack's story that matters most. He didn't help that elderly woman because he thought someone was watching. He didn't fix her car for free because he expected a reward. He did it because, when faced with a choice between his survival and someone else's dignity, he chose to be the person his mother raised him to be. That's the test we all face, every single day, and most of us never know we're being tested. Helena Ashford said it best during one of her conversations with Jack. "The world tests us every day, Mr. Murphy. Most people fail because they think no one's keeping score, but someone always is, even if it's just your own conscience, and you have to live with that scorekeeper for the rest of your life." 6 months after those black SUVs pulled into his lot, Jack sat in that same office, now renovated but still authentic, and reflected on everything that had changed. "I thought I was at my lowest point that week," he told a reporter. "Turns out I was at my testing point. The lowest moments in our lives aren't punishments. They're questions. Who are you when everything's on the line? What do you choose when choosing right means losing everything?" So let me ask you, what would you have done? Be honest with yourself. If you were $5,000 behind on rent, starring at Eviction, holding your last valuable spare part in your hands, and a stranger who couldn't pay you walked through your door, what would you choose? Would you find a way to help, or would you find a reason not to? In our modern world, it's easy to lose faith. We're surrounded by shortcuts and scams, by people looking for angles and loopholes, by a culture that seems to celebrate getting ahead at any cost. We see news stories about fraud and exploitation so often that kindness starts to feel naive, and integrity starts to look like weakness. But Jack Murphy's story reminds us of a truth we can't afford to forget: character matters. Not because it always leads to rewards, it usually doesn't, but because the person you become when no one's watching is the person you actually are. And that person, that's who you take with you everywhere into every decision for the rest of your life. The Ashford Foundation continues its work today, not because it's trying to find every good person in the world, but because it's trying to prove they still exist. Each story of integrity it uncovers becomes a light in the darkness, a reminder that we haven't lost ourselves completely, that gold hearts still beat in chests covered with grease and sweat and honest work. If this story moved you, do two things. Subscribe so you never miss stories that restore your faith in humanity, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that integrity still matters. Drop a comment telling me about a time someone's kindness changed your life, or when you were the one who showed up for someone else. Today, if you visit Murphy's Auto Repair, you'll find Jack exactly where he's always been, under the hood of someone's car, grease on his hands, teaching a young apprentice the difference between doing a job and doing it right. The shop has been transformed, yes. New paint, working tools, a coffee pot that actually heats water. But the soul of the place remains unchanged. On Jack's father's old desk, now restored and polished, sits a delicate silver locket on a thin chain. Helena eventually gave it to him, not as payment but as a reminder. He keeps it in his toolbox now, alongside his father's wrenches and his mother's photograph. Every time someone walks through his door asking for help, Jack touches that locket and asks himself one simple question: what would Mom do? And then he does it. Because Jack's story isn't about getting rich or being rewarded. It's about staying true when it would have been easier to compromise, about choosing character when no one you know is watching. It's proof that sometimes, not always but sometimes, the universe is paying attention. And sometimes, just sometimes, gold hearts get their moment to shine. This is Gilded Justice Stories, where we prove that good people still exist, and their stories deserve to be told. Until next time, stay golden.